243. In 2009, Arizona woman Marcia Powell was left in an outdoor cage while serving a 2-year sentence for prostitution. She was exposed to blistering heat for 4 hours and begged to be taken inside but was ignored. Marcia was later found dead from extreme heat exposure, with a core temperature of 108 degrees Fahrenheit and burn blisters all over her body. 16 prison employees were later fired or suspended for this horrible negligence, but no one was prosecuted. In 2010, Argentine model Joana Casas was allegedly shot in the head multiple times by her boyfriend just days before her 20th birthday. The man was later convicted of murder and sentenced to 13 years in prison. But despite this, Joanna's twin sister Edith ended up falling in love with the killer and married him less than a year into his sentence. Edith's parents have completely disowned her, stating that both girls are basically dead to them since, quote, Joanna is with God and Edith is with the devil. 373. The photo on the right shows a Houston police officer reacting outside the home where Andrea Yates drowned her 5 children in 2001. She started by holding 3 of her boys underwater in her bathtub until they stopped struggling. She then drowned her 6-month-old Mary, whom she left floating in the tub. Her last living child, Noah, soon walked in and asked what was wrong with Mary, then ran when he realized what was going on. But Yates quickly caught up to the 7-year-old and drowned him as well. Afterwards, she laid the lifeless bodies of her children together in her bed. She then called the police, repeatedly saying she needed an officer but refusing to say why. During the trial, the defense argued that Yates was severely mentally ill and not in control of her actions during the murders. She was in a deeply delusional state, believing she needed to murder her children to prevent them from going to hell. In 2006, she was found not guilty by reason of insanity and committed to a high-security mental hospital in Texas where she remains to this day. Morbid Fax, Part 369. Here's a 2021 photo of Alec Baldwin breaking down in tears after firing a prop gun that killed the director of photography on the movie set of Rust. The tragic incident happened as a result of catastrophic failures in safety procedures on the set. The woman who was responsible for checking the firearms was only 24 years old and had very little experience in her role. Rust was her second film as lead armorer since she had previously worked on another Western film called The Old Way, where she received multiple safety complaints from the cast and crew. She also admitted on a podcast that she felt overwhelmed and underprepared for her job on Rust. The live round that killed Helena Hutchins and injured Joel Souza was not supposed to be on the set at all. The production had a very strict rule that banned any live ammunition on the premises, and only blanks or dummy rounds could be used. But it was later revealed that some of the crew members used the same guns for target practice with live rounds during their off hours, and had failed to properly clean and inspect the weapons before returning them to the armory. Morbid Fax, Part 370. In 2010, the teenage daughter of Michelle Kalina came across something horrifying in her mother's closet, the decomposed remains of 5 babies. Over the course of 14 years, Michelle gave birth to at least 5 children, ending their lives immediately after they were born. She was sentenced to between 20 and 40 years in prison. When Frank Zappa was a child, he always played with the mercury that his chemist father brought home from work, often covering his entire bedroom floor with the element. But childhood exposure to mercury is now known to cause prostate cancer as an adult, which Zappa would end up dying from at the age of 52. In 1978, over 2,000 students from Pennsylvania tried to set the world record for the largest game of tug-of-war. But instead, the 2,000-foot rope snapped, releasing several thousand pounds of stored energy. Nearly 200 students were wounded, 5 had their fingertips severed, and hundreds more received second-degree burns. Morbid Fax, Part 371. In the case that Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin were left stranded on the moon, NASA planned on cutting off communication with them. They didn't want to record how the men chose to die, leaving them to either run out of oxygen or take their own lives with no further earthly contact. FDNY Ladder 3 was one of the first units to show up at the World Trade Center on 9/11. Its crew of 11 men sadly perished in the collapse of the North Tower, and now their truck is on display in the 9/11 Museum. In April of 2015, 28-year-old Shayna Sims gained access to a funeral home in Tulsa, Oklahoma. She pretended to be a makeup artist to access the body of Tabitha Lynch. Apparently, Shayna resented Lynch and suspected that her husband had been having an affair with her. So as payback, Sims decided to mutilate Lynch's body, cutting up her face and removing multiple organs and chunks of her hair. Court sentenced her to 16 years in prison for unlawfully removing a body part from a corpse. Morbid Fax, Part 374. Jeanette McCurdy has described the relationship she had with her mother Deborah as both emotionally and sexually abusive. When Jeanette was 3 years old, her mother was diagnosed with breast cancer and underwent multiple surgeries and transplants. As a result, Deborah would perform routine vaginal and breast exams on Jeanette and never allowed her to shower alone until she turned 17. Living in poverty, her mother forced Jeanette into acting when she was 6 years old to financially support the family, and because Deborah had always wanted to become famous herself. McCurdy says that her mother was obsessed with making her a star and introduced Jeanette to a calorie restriction once she turned 11, leading to various eating disorders that Jeanette still struggles with, including anorexia and bulimia. McCurdy says that she refused to appear in the revival series of iCarly, only because she didn't want to be reminded of her mother's abuse during the original show. Just last year, Jeanette released a book with the title I'm Glad My Mom Died 9 years after she passed away from breast cancer. Morbid Fax, Part 244. When Afghan girl Bibi Aisha was 12 years old, her father promised her to a Taliban fighter as compensation for a murder committed by a member of Bibi's family. This practice, known as BAD, demands that a female from a criminal's family be given to the victim's family as a servant or bride. Bibi was forced into a badly abusive marriage, which she eventually escaped from years later at the age of 18. But Bibi was soon found by police and jailed for 5 months before being returned to her father, who sent her back to her abusive husband's family. As revenge for her escape, they took her to the mountains and cut off her nose and ears before leaving her to die. Luckily, she was rescued by aid workers and flown to the U.S. to receive free reconstructive surgery. But upon arriving, Bibi suffered from severe panic attacks, seizures, and self-harm as a result of the trauma she endured. Thankfully, her condition drastically improved over time, and she underwent 12 surgeries before peacefully residing in Maryland. Morbid Fax, Part 240. In 2001, 13-year-old Boy Scout Cody Clausen went missing for more than 18 hours near Yellowstone Park. He spent the night curled up in a cave, fearing that he would end up being eaten by bears. But eventually, he got a pilot's attention by using his reflective belt buckle as a signal. And the pilot was none other than actor Harrison Ford, who saved the boy's life. In 1719, the mistress of Tsar Peter the Great was executed by decapitation after being found guilty of aborting her baby. After the execution, the Tsar picked up his mistress's head, gave a lecture about its anatomy, kissed it, and then threw it away. Helios Flight 522 was the case of a ghost plane, where the cabin didn't pressurize and all 121 passengers on board except for one man passed out from hypoxia. The plane circled for hours on autopilot before the only conscious person, flight attendant Andreas Prodromou, took over the controls. He managed to steer the plane away from a city before crashing it into a rural hillside when it ran out of fuel. Morbid Fax, Part 241. In the year 2000, pop singer Kirsty McCall died a hero at the age of 41. While she was vacationing with her family in Mexico, a speedboat entered the restricted diving area and headed straight toward Kirsty and her son. She managed to push her teenage boy out of the way just in time, but was run over in the process and killed instantly. Ulysses S. Grant was also supposed to be assassinated by John Wilkes Booth, but he didn't attend the play at Ford Theater because his wife wasn't on good terms with Lincoln's. In 2013, Florida man Jeff Bush was sleeping in his bedroom when a large sinkhole suddenly opened up directly beneath his bed, quickly swallowing him and his entire bedroom. His brother Jeremy heard his screams and jumped into the hole to rescue him, but was unable to reach him in time. Jeremy had to be pulled out by a police officer, even though he swore he could still hear his brother calling his name. Sadly, Jeff's body was never recovered, and the hole was eventually filled in. Morbid Fax, Part 313. After Star Wars The Phantom Menace was released in 1999, Jar Jar Binks quickly became the most hated character in the franchise. The backlash was so devastating for Ahmed Best, the actor who played him, that he nearly took his own life. The first chainsaw was invented by 2 Scottish doctors in the year 1780. It was originally used to help open up the pelvis during childbirth. In 1958, North Carolina, a white girl told her parents that she kissed two black boys aged 9 and 7 on the cheeks.